Hey folks, I appreciate you joining today. It is July 1st, first day of the new month, and July certainly in North American agriculture is the most significant month, at least I would say, for yield differential. August and June, you can certainly make the case that they're nearly equally as important, and then of course getting into your kind of planting or harvest window, but this is the one where we're really kind of making the crop. So we want to get this forecast right. There's a lot going on here. I'm going to talk about some changing patterns, I think, here this week, but really kind of looking out into next week. We want to get an idea of where we're going to be at in pollination. So I'll take a look at that forecast. And I'm going to talk about the tropics in this video as well, but really my focus, at least in terms of that mid to late July forecast, might be as much focused on typhoons rather than hurricanes. And what I'm talking about is tropical development, tropical cyclone development in the West North Pacific. That is over by Japan. Yes, I think that development over there might be more important for our weather than even more imminent tropical development closer to the continental U.S. I'm going to explain all that kind of the middle to end of the video here. We're going to talk about some more near-term weather in the first part of this video. So I'll get into that now. I was looking at this kind of radar loop over the last 18 to 24 hours across the continental U.S., and I picked up two things. One, I'm going to let this replay quickly. And notice the shower and storm development yesterday across the eastern U.S. kind of had a shape like that, if you can see the movement of those storms. And that's because instead of this ridge that we had kind of parked in this area last week, we actually have a weak trough across the eastern U.S. here this morning. The other thing I noticed, if you look across Texas, again, we had these kind of weakening outflow boundaries. Eric posted one yesterday that looked almost identical to the one we had yesterday morning as well. You see that one kind of spinning there across the state. And then this other one here across the north part of the Texas area. When I see these kind of weakening like that, they tend to point, if they're pointing at one another, they tend to point at an area of potential drought development. In fact, if I jump over and look at the last 72 hours of precipitation, you can see this area here missing out this weekend on precip, another area here in northern Illinois and eastern Iowa as well. So this outflow boundary is kind of weakening with those storms, tell you where the storms are struggling to push into. And so you can see that here. You can see that here, two areas that we're watching. Now, these are two very different areas in terms of the weather that they've had this spring. This area and this corridor all the way through the Mid-South, just uber wet this year. So this here is shifting over a little bit drier, not necessarily a huge concern now, but if it continues, this is an area where we can see that kind of faucet shut off. I mean, we see it every year. If any state's going to do that, it's going to be kind of Texas, Arkansas, or Tennessee. So I do want to keep an eye on it despite how wet this corridor has been. And you can kind of see all of this. We just jump over and look at the NASA estimated soil moisture deficits. I mean, despite all the rain that area has had this year, it's now looking more neutral to even on the drier side in some of these NASA soil moisture deficits. And then, I-80 over toward Kokomo, Indiana, Dwight, Illinois, over toward localized areas of Iowa, still just kind of lingering soil moisture deficits in this area, even kind of into portions of Michigan. They've had rain events. It's not like it's been this big plateau of rain accumulation, but just less than everybody else around them. And sure enough, they're still in these kind of deficits here in early July. Give you an example of this. This is Dwight, Illinois. Again, stair-step year-to-date rain events. You can see those on the calendar starting from January 1st. But when you add it all up, over the last 2 months, it's drier than average, and we're seeing that on the soil moisture deficits. We jump over and look at the upper level height map. This is looking at 500 millibars, so just below jet stream level winds. You can see two things here. One, that trough that we kind of gleaned from the radar presentation, and then Flossie. This is a Category 1 hurricane that developed overnight in the eastern Pacific. I'll take a look at that. And then I should mention this kind of broad ridging over the western U.S. We have a subtropical low underneath it, but this general ridging that we're seeing here is going to be moving west to east across the country this week, so I'll have to take a look at that. Storm Prediction Center reports yesterday, this map looking pretty clear. So some reports over Pennsylvania, tornado report or two in Delaware and New Jersey, but just not as busy of a map without more proper northwest flow, midsummer thunderstorm development. Jump over and look at the National Hurricane Center, their 7-day outlook for tropical development. Watching the potential for a system here developing up around Florida. We do have an upper level low here, but it has been struggling to develop anything, even kind of overnight, not seeing the typical kind of spinning up or increase in thunderstorm development you would see for any sort of imminent tropical development. This likely wouldn't be a huge threat to land anyway. If it developed, it would be a weak tropical system quickly exiting to the east, but all the while bringing rainfall to the state of Florida. So that part of the forecast is still relevant. If we just kind of look this morning, some thunderstorm development here near the coast, but you're not seeing any kind of proper spinning up of organized thunderstorm activity, not yet at least. Where we have seen more organized development, it's been in the eastern Pacific. So Flossie developing last night. This is a Category 1 hurricane, fortunately forecast to move away from land. That's the direction that we like to see, but it is close enough right now that they have posted some tropical storm warnings out for the coast of Mexico in closer proximity to it. And these are always neat to look at on infrared satellites. So if I pull that up, you can see it spinning overnight, trying to wrap those deep thunderstorms around the center of it. Doesn't quite have an eye yet. Maybe has what I call that like a little wink there at the end. But those thunderstorms really spinning quickly now, trying to wrap up. So definitely looks like a hurricane this morning at about Cat 1 strength. If we look bigger picture, we can see in the water vapor imagery that drier air on the backside of that trough now moving through Illinois and Indiana. Out ahead of it, we still have this moist air, and that's kind of pointing at us where we're going to see the heaviest rainfall potential. We're watching a corridor in here today into the mid-Atlantic. We'll take a look at that. And the next slide or two, we can see Flossie here, that subtropical low near California, that another one of these here, weak one near Florida, but it's really this kind of moisture stream heading toward what I'll call maybe Virginia, Maryland, and New Jersey that has my eye today. Jump over and look at the 3 kilometer NAM forecast. Let's make this valid about 6 a.m. I'm going to play this quickly through lunchtime today, and then now all the way 5 p.m. Eastern. You can see severe thunderstorm development likely here in the DMV area, eastern Pennsylvania, Virginia, maybe West Virginia earlier, Maryland, Delaware here, pushing through today, and then potential heavy rainfall behind it into the overnights. This is now 9 p.m. Eastern time before that trough pushes further east and that activity exits the eastern U.S., but even seeing some lingering development even tomorrow on Wednesday in portions of Florida and the Carolinas. All the while not seeing a lot of activity. Again, that drier air behind that trough, maybe a few of these kind of northwest flow showers and storms, but these are going to be very, very localized and not widespread like we saw even at times over the weekend. Playing this toward Thursday, you can kind of see this forecast ending before things get going on Thursday as well, maybe over here in the western plains. I did want to jump over, this is the excessive rainfall outlook from the Weather Prediction Center here today, and again, outlining a moderate risk for flooding. That is not something to dismiss here in northern Virginia, through the Washington, D.C. area, up through Baltimore, and then into southeastern Pennsylvania. And this is overlapped with a slight risk area from the Storm Prediction Center. So potential severe thunderstorms followed by heavy rainfall in this area here. So have a way to receive warnings and stay safe here today. And then sure enough, the all hazards map out of NOAA this morning. Flash flood watch is posted for this area here. Saw some flood warnings here overnight, a lingering MCS kind of spinning up here in southern Indiana. So we even see a flash flood warning still valid as of this morning. Some flood watches for West Texas. And then that general ridging I showed earlier, heat out west. So eastern Washington and portions of Montana, some red flag warnings underneath that as well in the Intermountain West with that subtropical low spinning in some winds and dry thunderstorm activity over that area. I mentioned that ridge. I didn't want to get out into that forecast here, so I'm going to make this 500 millibar height forecast valid for this morning. There's that subtropical low over California, that weak one over Florida, that general troughiness over the eastern U.S. We even got Flossie here, all the significant players, if you will. And here is that ridge parked over the northwestern U.S. I'm going to play this forecast through today to Wednesday, Thursday. Let's get out to Friday, July 4th for the holiday. And that ridge has moved from Alberta all the way over to Ontario, right through the work week. So that heat going to be moving along with it. Some drier conditions as well, moving over to the Midwest at the end of the week. And we can see that pushing over the eastern U.S. as we go through the day, Saturday the 5th and Sunday. So the pattern's moving, right? That ridge didn't park itself in the northwest. It moved across the country and likely seeing through the week storm activity potentially picking up on the backside of that over the plains as well. We just look at the temperature pattern here, valid as of Tuesday. Maximum temperatures forecast from the National Weather Service. See the highest heat anomalies here in central and eastern Washington, portions of Montana, Boise, Idaho as well. But if I play the forecast into tomorrow, Wednesday, you can see that heat moving east underneath the thunderstorm development over West Texas, potentially cooler weather here. Florida as well. Thursday now into Friday. That ridge moving from the west to east where we were warm, now we're cooler. And those 90s pushing back into the Midwest as we get into Friday, Saturday, and then we'll take it out. We'll end it here Sunday, that heat pushing across the eastern U.S. So the pattern is moving. Again, that is kind of preventing that drought risk from building in one area, preventing the heat from sitting over one area, picking up the evaporation rates, and producing that kind of midsummer feedback that we watch for this time of year. We have the 7-day forecast from the EC. No, this is from the WPC here, so the official National Weather Service forecast. Just that activity over the next kind of 24 to 48 hours here across the eastern U.S. is clear just from this forecast. And then again, on the backside of that ridge, as it moves through this week, watching for the potential for plains and upper Midwest thunderstorm development. Areas here that we're still concerned about, right? I called this pocket here in northern Illinois, southern Indiana, I should say northern Indiana, southwestern Michigan. And this Arklatex area is still dry in that 7-day forecast. Some chances for storms and precip in here. It's not likely to be just totally bone dry in both of these areas, but I'm watching both of them considering that they're dry in the past and looking a little bit drier in the forecast here as well. And if I want to look further in the forecast, I am going to jump us over to the West Pacific like I promised. What I'm showing you here, these are graphics of typhoons and the Northwest Pacific. So what I mean by that is typically south of Japan, north of the Philippines, in between China, Hong Kong, this area here, vulnerable for tropical storm and cyclone development. They're called typhoons there from the Japanese, but we watch them the same way we do hurricanes in the Atlantic as well. And what I'm showing you here is a climatological map of typhoon tracks by month. The reason I'm doing that is to show when that activity typically picks up historically. So here's January, you can see just a few historically. February, that continues. March, April, maybe a little bit more activity in April. They have the same kind of summer seasonal pattern that we do. Here's May, June, and then look at July. I mean, compare July, all the activity here, to March or April. That continues significantly in August, September, and October as well, similar to our season before weakening, heading toward the spring months. But in late summer, when these do develop, there is this predictable effect on the North American pattern. And what we see, specifically south of Japan, if we get significant typhoon development, it strengthens the jet stream over the North Pacific. At the terminus of this jet stream here, you can see this typhoon here strengthening the jet stream. We typically see a deep low pressure system develop somewhere south of Alaska or near the Aleutians that pulls up warm, moist air into British Columbia, into Alaska at times, the Yukon, and we get northwest ridging far in the northwest part of the continent, and that typically the yin-yang of the atmosphere produces more troughing across the east. Now, this can bring northwest flow thunderstorms in this area, but if it is bringing a lot of convergent flow outside those northwest flow thunderstorms, it can bring dryness as well into some of these areas. Now, the good news is if this does happen, it's typically cooler in this area here, at least more seasonal with the more warmth and the anomalous heat further to the west. So it's not like one of these huge kind of ridge, 100-degree temperatures and a lack of rainfall. But it is something we watch this time of year, especially in kind of August and September as well. And the reason I'm showing that is because while there's not imminent typhoon development now, if I just show you this global forecast, this is from the ECMWF. Now, I don't have on this plot here the ones that we produce, low pressure system or winds for the global map. But if I take the forecast forward, again, looking at this area here in the West Pacific, you can see potential development here north of the Philippines as well. And the reason I can say that is because, well, here's we call the ITCZ across the equator of thunderstorm development. But when you see heavy rainfall development like this in the West Pacific, this is almost certainly some kind of tropical development. And so seeing that in the ECMWF and then seeing it as well in the 500 millibar height forecast, I'm going to show you there's one there. And watching another potential system here north of the Philippines. So as we watch these tropical developments here in the month of July and into the month of August, if they're strong enough, they can start to have a predictable impact on the jet stream where we see more ridging or blocking moving in over either Alaska or the western U.S. or northwest part of Canada as well. And sure enough, if I take this 500 millibar height forecast into the future, this is now the 5th, 6th, and 7th. There's the ECMWF, potential strong typhoon here in the West Pacific. As that continues to sit there south of Japan, it builds in this ridge here over the northwestern U.S. So increasing the jet stream flow over the Pacific, that tends to produce that low near Alaska. Well, if you get an upper level trough here near Alaska, it's going to bring an upper level ridge likely downstream of that over the northwest. And then we get cooler weather into the Midwest, maybe some northwest flow thunderstorms, and then some areas potentially of dryness concern over the eastern part of the country. So we're kind of seeing that, almost textbook scenario play out, at least in some of the long range forecasts here. This is July 10th. And then if I show you the GFS as well, GFS actually a stronger typhoon development over here in the West Pacific. And as a result, you see that low near Alaska, some of this general ridging across the northwest. And play the forecast in July 9th, see much stronger development here in the West Pacific. This is east of Taiwan. Large ridge over the northwest, that low still over Alaska. General lower heights over the Midwest, maybe cooler temperatures, potentially northwest flow through this corridor. And some areas maybe of dryness in between that setting up somewhere. We just look at the ECMWF, their 5-day rolling temperature averages. Well, here's the next 5 days through the work week, that ridge starting in the northwest and moving to the east. That thunderstorm development over Texas and Florida, keeping those cooler temperatures. As I take this into the 6th through the 11th, see that heat rebuilding over the northwest, continuing in the eastern U.S. through this weekend. As I play it out, 0 to 10-day average, you can see that heat trying to return to the northwest here. Indicative potentially of that troughing here, south of Alaska, ridging over the northwest as well. And if we jump over and look at the 10-day precipitation departures from average from the ECMWF, if we get that ridge building back in here, right, we're going to see some northwest flow thunderstorm development likely in this corridor here, but maybe in between some of this rainfall here over Florida or Texas, an area to watch in the mid-south or the Gulf states for some dryness building in. Now, there's some differences in the forecast. This is the ECMWF forecast, specifically out to 10 days. If I jump over and show you the ECMWF AIFS, you can see that's leaving some corridor of dryness here over that area of concern in northern Illinois and northern Indiana. See drier conditions underneath that ridge over the northwest. Some northwest flow thunderstorms here over the upper Midwest, Wisconsin, Iowa, eastern Nebraska, portions of Kansas. Has better rainfall down here over the Gulf Coast states. If I just compare that explicitly over the same time period with the European forecast, you can see some differences. One, the ECMWF has more precipitation filling in here over the Midwest and the ice states, and it keeps more of that concern down here in that kind of Arklatex mid-south area for drought development through the kind of first half of July, at least out through July 10th. Whereas the AFS has that area of concern much further north over the Midwest. Again, this isn't, your typical kind of proper, big upper level ridge drought development. It's more localized. So these areas, it's not going to be as predictable out in that 10-day forecast here, where that kind of big upper level ridges is really more out here. So that's an area that we're seeing, more proper, what we're predicting to be lower than average precipitation kind of over the next 10 days. But again, it's somewhat dependent on the strength of this typhoon development. I really do think that this impact and what it has on the jet stream, if we jump over and look at those 300 millibar winds, this just from the GFS forecast here. Notice those increasing as that typhoon sets in. And we have to jump over to the other side of the map here. We can see that devolving into this troughing here over the eastern part of the Pacific, south of Alaska, and that ridging over the northwest. And we see that general activity here at least through the middle part of July. Now, after that, right, not seeing as much typhoon development, we're looking at a potential pattern change as we get out toward the 10th and the 15th. Eric kind of talked about that yesterday, as well as kind of a critical time period. Jump over and look at the ECMWF AFS forecast. The reason that I think we're seeing the AFS focus maybe more so on this area for dry weather rather than the Gulf Coast states, because if I take this forecast out through the 6th, the 7th, the 8th, this ridge looking more anomalously strong on the AFS. It's looking a little bit stronger, and so downstream of that, we take this out through the 10th. We actually get lower heights here over the Gulf Coast states. We see a broader upper level ridge across Canada, and this, talked about this before, these kind of lows that get into this area here tend to rob that Bermuda high moisture train from getting all the way up into the Midwest. So if we do see a system develop like this, and this broad ridging across the upper Midwest or Canada, that can cut off the Midwest from some better moisture. This would be the middle part, kind of July 10th, 11th, and 12th. Again, this forecast well out into the forecast period here. It's different than the ECMWF, which is keeping this corridor wetter, but we are looking at some of the kind of forecast forks in the road here. Climate Prediction Center, regardless of like the exact pattern that we're going to play out in terms of precipitation, the temperature forecast is a little bit clearer with the northwest ridging likely to develop in the 8th to the 14th time period, above average temperatures expected. Over the Midwest, some of the precipitation here, the lower heights, more troughing, more seasonal to below average, and then warmer across the southeastern part of the country. If we jump over and look at the precipitation anomalies, continuing to see a fast start to the monsoon season. That subtropical low is assisting here near California. Northwest ridging and heat helps to pull in even more moisture. It's the middle part of July. You can see that forecast here. And then curiously, the Climate Prediction Center going over wetter in their forecast for the southeast and maybe leaving that drier concern in the middle part of the month closer to the Midwest. Again, not seeing, leaning or likely below average for precipitation. But if any area that we saw maybe in that long-term forecast to watch, it was maybe this corridor here getting in July, not necessarily for high temperatures, but then that kind of quietly dry July scenario that maybe we talked about in June. I did want to touch on Europe quickly. This is their 5-day rolling temperature forecast from the ECMWF. This is looking at those temp anomalies in that color contour. This is over the next 5 days, so continuing to see that heat build into the country, that dryness as well. But if I take the forecast out, that 5 to 10 days, starting to see a cold front and temperature relief, and likely with that, here's from the ECMWF ensemble, finally that 8 to 14 day outlook showing some chances for precipitation getting into the middle part of Europe, but generally over the next 14 days still on the drier side. So relief coming from the heat, I think, over the next kind of 5 to 10 days, but still trending drier than average for portions of Western and Central Europe as well. That's the last slide I have for you all today. Thanks for watching, and Eric will be back with you all tomorrow.